we're going to be looking at the Behringer BCF2000. This is a device from around 2007, 2008. Probably one of the best devices I've actually ever made, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to be well supported anymore. It got later superseded by the Touch X. So there's a lot of problems getting this working with Apple Silicon Macs and Ableton Live. I've managed to resolve them, so I'm going to show you how. Now, the main issue that you may be running into when you've got USB mode plugged in and you've got Mackie control mode enabled here in Ableton Live is that your faders may just keep jumping back to 0. And you may have tried switching all of these settings on and off. You may have tried different templates and surfaces here, but nothing quite seems to work. So this seems to be due to Apple Silicon and the way that the communication happens between your MacBook and the BCF unit itself over USB. So the solution to that is, firstly, you need to get a MIDI interface. So we're going to chop out USB directly connected to your laptop. We're going to go for a USB driver such as the one I'm going to show on the screen here. This is something you can get off Amazon for like about 10 or 15 pounds. It's essentially a USB dongle which then translates that data to old MIDI DIN connectors. So the key thing now is to switch on the unit, holding down this second to left button. That's going to put it into Mackie mode. And you want to hold it down until you see EG pop up. You then need to go over and make sure it's selected to S4 and press exit. So what that's doing is that's telling the unit to talk to the machine over the old MIDI connectors and not any USB. And if we go into Ableton, we're going to go to settings and make sure you have the Mackie control surface selected, USB MIDI interface. Let's just zero these out and put them back in again. There we go. And you don't need to click any of these buttons down here, track and remote. The control surface template should actually take care of all of those. So let's test it out. Okay, we see some faders here. Let's see if we move it in Ableton, we can see it's now working on the unit. The motorized faders are going up and down. Let's add a couple of tracks. We can see the faders pop up. And let's make sure data is going back to the software. Yes, it is. So that is now basically set up. And we'll talk about some of the features you can do with this. Actually, is surprisingly tightly integrated. So obviously you've got your faders that you can move up and down. If you click the top row of buttons, that's doing your enablement on and off of the channels themselves. Right at the top, you've got your pans. You can fiddle around with those. And what else? These two are shift buttons. So when you press them down, you can then access other functions. So let's do shift 1 and click a few of these here. So we can see now it's soloing. That doesn't seem to do anything. This button here is basically your main mixer mode. These two don't seem to work. But if you click here, this is where it gets interesting. This is your plugins mode. So you'll see that the pot here has basically been lit up. And what you can now do is you can control some of the plugins that you may have on those channels. So we can see here we've got a EQ. Let's actually remove that and add something a bit simpler. So we've got an EQ3, and the more plugins that we add on the channel, you can see for each one, this guy is lighting up, and it's basically going to allow you to select that plugin and then control it. So let's select the first EQ, and this is all pre-mapped. So you've got these controls here, switching things on and off. If you go back to the plugins view, you can control, for instance, the erosion. Let's have a look. Here we go. And one of the cool things that actually means you can do as well is if we remove all of these, we could then create an audio effect rack and have an SSL type channel all all pre-mapped for us. So let's go here. Say we like to use Pro Q3, and we like to have a basic compressor. We can then go here to macros, and we can start mapping this out. So we click configure. Let's get that enabled, and that enabled. And then we hit, I believe, map. So we're mapping this to this. Band 2 gain to macro 2. Band 3 gain to here. And just as an example, let's put a threshold onto there. Okay, so we finished our mapping. And now if we go back into the plugin mode and hit plugin, we've actually got all of that now pre-mapped. So we can see Pro Qs being handled. We can see the compressor threshold is going up and down. So this is pretty good for if you want a quite a fast workflow, hands-free. You could have this on the default for every track, and just from the unit be able to control all of your basic kind of settings and plugins. We can now have a look at some of the other things you can control as well. So on the right here, I've got the Mackie mapping documentation up from Behringer. I'll link to this as well in the description, so you can have a look at yourself. Some of the functions work, some of them don't. You know, considering this is a 20-year-old mapping originally for Cubase SX, you know, it's not surprising some of it doesn't work. But what does work is we've already talked about the main mixer mode, controlling faders. We've talked about plugin mode. You also have something interesting here called flip. So if you press the first shift button and this guy here, you've now flipped the controls. So your panning is now controlled by the faders, and the volumes are now controlled by this. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know. Maybe if you love setting your panning very accurately, you can enjoy doing that. Let's flip it back. So shift and flip. We've also got a lot of functions for the stop and play controls. So in terms of transport controls, if we look here, we can see we've got stop here, we've got play, we've got forward, back. If we hit shift, we can also then do record. That's pretty cool. And then I think this is play from start with the shift held down. This also helps with some navigation, so holding shift and doing left and right. If we hold the second shift button and then click these banks here, they basically seem to be view controls. So you can see at the bottom the window seems to change. I think it's showing the effects and clips. If we go back here, this is switching between the two different views. This is just enabling different views basically. But this one is interesting. So this was the bottom shift and the top right button. Now we're controlling our send channels, so you can see them here. We can again pan and do other things with them as well. And once we're done with that, I think we just go back to this mode. Enjoy, let me know what else you find. I think it's still pretty good integration for 2025, and it's still a great unit, it still works perfectly. So if you're thinking of picking one of these up secondhand with this integration, it should work pretty well. Let me know what else you guys find. Thanks.